Eric Voss had never felt more nervous in his life. He stood in the airlock of the human research vessel Aurora, staring at the black expanse of space where the massive alien ship, the Obsidian Throne, floated like a dark jewel. Even from a distance, the ship seemed alive, pulsating with an eerie light that shifted and shimmered as if it breathed. His orders were clear: make first contact with the Zalaris, but the voice in his head whispered constant warnings. The Zalaris were not known for mercy. Entire fleets had vanished in their path. They were feared, brutal, and efficient. And here he was, just a single human, tasked with meeting their queen. The airlock hissed open, and Eric stepped onto the alien vessel. The floor beneath him was smooth, almost liquid in appearance, and it reflected the dim ambient lights in strange patterns. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if the ship itself were aware of his presence. He swallowed hard, gripping the edge of his uniform. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn back. But he couldn't. Humanity had sent him here, and he had to perform. A soft hum filled the chamber, growing louder as he was guided forward. Alien guards flanked the hallway, their shapes unlike anything Eric had seen. They had multiple limbs, armored skin that glimmered with a metallic sheen, and faces that were both beautiful and terrifying. Eric realized quickly that their expressions were impossible to read. Every step made his heart pound faster. At the end of the corridor, a massive door opened, revealing a vast chamber filled with shadows and light. At the center, sitting on a throne that seemed carved from black crystal and alive with flowing energy, was the queen herself. Silthara. Eric froze. She was more terrifying than he had imagined. Her body was enormous, covered in an iridescent exoskeleton that reflected light in colors he didn't have names for. Limbs extended from her sides, moving independently like they had their own thoughts. Her eyes glowed with a deep liquid gold, and her gaze felt like it could pierce right through him. Even her voice, when she spoke, rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "You are human," she said, her tone not unkind, but carrying the weight of centuries. "Lieutenant Eric Voss, I have heard of your species." She rose from her throne, and the room seemed to shrink around her presence. Eric's mind raced. He needed to say something impressive, something that would prove humans were clever, courageous, and worthy of her attention. But as he opened his mouth, panic gripped him. You look beautiful," he blurted out before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like a spark in a dark forest. The chamber went completely silent. Even the hum of the ship seemed to pause. Eric's stomach dropped. He had meant to sound diplomatic, to compliment her presence in a tactful way. Instead, he had made a ridiculous, almost childish comment. His cheeks burned. He expected fire, venom, or worse. Instead, the queen tilted her head. One of her limbs traced a slow, graceful pattern in the air, and her golden eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in curiosity. "Beautiful," she repeated, her voice softer, almost amused. Eric wanted to sink into the floor. I mean, yes, I meant, your presence is remarkable." His words stumbled out in a rush, none of them landing correctly. She regarded him silently, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. For the first time, Eric noticed the subtle movements of her ship, like the walls themselves were listening, waiting. He had no idea if she would tolerate him for another second. "Remarkable," she said finally. A pause. "Interesting choice of words for a species I do not understand." "Interesting, I mean no offense." "Or foolish, perhaps both." Eric could see every tiny detail of her exoskeleton now, the faint lines that ran along her arms, the subtle shimmer where the light hit her golden eyes. She was terrifying, and yet there was a spark of something else. Curiosity. "You speak of potential," she said slowly, almost tasting the word. "What makes your species worthy of notice?" He had studied the Zalaris for years, read countless reports of their conquests and their disdain for other races. Now he had to convince the most feared being in the galaxy that humans were more than weak, fragile creatures. "Well," he said, trying to sound confident even though his hands shook, "humans are adaptable. We learn quickly, and we find solutions when there seems to be none. We work together even under pressure, and we care about others, about life. That might be rare in the galaxy. And for life itself. Or died from their own foolishness. Your species has a strange quality, impulsive, reckless, yet it contains a spark. That spark may be useful or dangerous, we shall see. You will stay aboard my ship. You will observe, you will learn, and perhaps you will teach me something in return." Every corner seemed alive, every shadow a potential threat, or ally. As they moved deeper into the ship, Eric realized something important. He was not just a guest, he was a test. Every action, every word would be measured and weighed. One mistake, one wrong step, and it could be the end. He tried to steady his thoughts. Humans had faced impossible odds before. They had survived disasters, wars, and threats that seemed insurmountable. And now, in the presence of the most feared being in the galaxy, he would have to prove that same resilience, that same spark, that same humanity. The Queen led him into a chamber where the walls seemed to shift, displaying images of worlds, fleets, and stars. She gestured at the holographic display. These are territories we influence, systems we watch, civilizations we guide or destroy. Do you understand, human, what it means to hold power over life itself? Perhaps this human may survive longer than expected, she murmured. And in that moment, despite the fear, the intimidation, and the uncertainty, Eric felt a strange thrill. He had survived the first encounter, and somehow he had made the Queen pause. In his panic, he had spoken words that could have ended his life. Instead, they had sparked curiosity. Eric did not yet know how dangerous it truly was to impress the most terrifying alien queen in the galaxy. But he would learn, and he would have to rely on every ounce of human ingenuity, courage, and heart to survive what came next. For now, he walked beside her, aware that one mistake could be fatal, but also aware that even the smallest human spark might shine in the darkest corners of the universe. And perhaps, just perhaps, that spark could change everything. Eric had spent hours walking through the twisting corridors of the Obsidian Throne, trying to understand how the ship functioned. Every hallway seemed alive, walls pulsing like the heartbeat of a giant creature. He had seen rooms that shifted shape, panels that responded to thought, and creatures that seemed part machine, part living organism. His mind was a whirlwind of awe and fear. The Queen, Silthara, moved with ease through it all, her many limbs flowing gracefully, guiding him without speaking much. He tried to keep up, careful not to trip or show fear, but the sensation of being constantly watched made his chest tight. Every glance from her golden eyes reminded him of how small, fragile, and human he truly was. Yet he also felt something strange. He was not completely dismissed. She had allowed him here, and that meant something. Finally, she stopped at a chamber filled with large, transparent domes. Inside each dome floated what looked like miniature worlds, tiny civilizations spinning silently in their private bubbles. Eric stepped closer, his curiosity overcoming his fear. Each of these, Silthara said, her voice echoing slightly, represents a system under our observation. Some thrive, some fail, some we adjust when necessary. Some survive. Even when situations seem impossible, we find solutions. We cooperate, we learn, that is how we survive. The choice is yours. He had to remain calm, ask only careful questions, and follow every unspoken rule. One wrong movement, and he knew, could cost him his life. At one point, they entered a room where a group of Zalaris engineers worked on repairing a damaged section of the ship. The systems were intricate, alien, and completely foreign to him. Yet Eric's mind, trained in problem-solving, noticed a pattern they seemed to overlook. A small misalignment in a power conduit could cascade, causing the ship to lose energy in that sector. "Excuse me," he said cautiously, stepping closer. "I think that conduit, if left unaligned, might cause a system failure." Silthara's gaze immediately shifted to him, studying his suggestion. There was a tense moment where the room seemed to hold its breath. "Show me," she said, her voice low but commanding. Eric carefully explained, demonstrating how the misalignment could trigger a chain reaction. The engineers examined his idea, and after some adjustments, they corrected it. The energy stabilized. A small cheer, more like a ripple of approval, passed through the room. Silthara's gaze softened slightly, though her golden eyes still carried power. "Interesting," she said. "You have insight beyond your species' typical capacity." Over the next few days, Eric's presence aboard the ship became routine, though still stressful. He was assigned minor duties at first, monitoring communications, assisting in simulations, observing how the Zalaris interacted with their own technology. But slowly, Silthara began to include him in more important matters. He learned to read the subtle cues of the Queen's moods. A shift in her limbs, the angle of her head, the faint pulse of light across the chamber. All were signs he needed to pay attention to. One wrong interpretation could mean insult. One correct reading could mean survival or trust. It was during one observation session that disaster struck. A section of the ship's energy shield flickered unexpectedly. Warning lights flashed across the chamber, casting deep shadows over Eric's face. The shield was designed to protect the ship from external attacks, but a breach could expose the obsidian throne to destruction. Silthara's limbs moved quickly, directing engineers and issuing orders in her deep, resonant voice. Eric realized immediately what was happening. The system relied on a series of conduits and energy nodes that were misaligned, similar to what he had noticed before. Without intervention, the shield could collapse. He swallowed hard but didn't hesitate. "I can help," he said, stepping forward. The Queen's eyes focused on him, assessing. "Explain," she commanded. Eric took a deep breath. "If we reroute energy through these nodes in this sequence, it will stabilize the shield. The conduit here needs slight adjustment. It's similar to the pattern I noticed before. If we act quickly, we can prevent failure." Eric worked with them, directing energy flows and suggesting adjustments. Every second was critical. Sweat ran down his forehead, but he kept calm, focusing on the logic of the system rather than the fear of failure. Finally, the shield stabilized. Warning lights faded. The room exhaled collectively, though no sound like human laughter marked the moment. Silthara observed silently for a moment, then stepped forward. One of her limbs brushed against his shoulder, not threateningly, but acknowledging. "You are clever," she said. "Humans are capable of remarkable solutions when pressed." Human ingenuity, fragile as it was in the eyes of the galaxy, had made a difference. The next hours were quieter. Eric was allowed to rest in a small chamber, designed to simulate a comfortable environment, though it still carried the unmistakable pulse of the ship. He lay down on the soft surface, thinking. He realized something important. The Queen did not fear humans the way he had feared her. She was curious, intrigued, and testing them in ways he could barely understand. Yet danger was never far. Every time he stepped into another chamber, every time he spoke, he had to measure his words, anticipate alien perception, and act with careful courage. He had learned that fear could be a tool if controlled properly, but panic could be fatal. The following day, Eric was brought to a chamber filled with maps of the surrounding systems. Silthara gestured to a holographic display showing dozens of stars, fleets, and potential threats. "You will observe our interactions with these systems," she said, "and perhaps advise. Your perspective may be enlightening." "Interesting," she said. "You consider strategy beyond survival. You anticipate, you adapt. That is unusual." Clever, quick thinking, and courage under pressure were qualities that could make a difference even in the presence of the galaxy's most terrifying beings. That evening, Silthara led him to a high balcony overlooking the ship's command center. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the transparent floor. "Humans are small," she said quietly, "but your species has spark. A quality rarely seen in beings I have observed for millennia. You may prove that spark is not merely survival, but influence." As he prepared to rest, Eric felt a mix of fear and excitement. The Queen's curiosity was a dangerous thing, but it was also an opportunity. The galaxy was vast and humans were small, yet he understood now that courage, ingenuity, and heart could make them matter. And for the first time since stepping aboard the obsidian throne, he allowed himself a quiet thought. Perhaps humans were not as weak as the galaxy believed. Perhaps with the right spark, they could survive and even thrive in the company of the most terrifying beings in existence. Eric drifted to sleep that night with the hum of the ship in his ears, knowing the days ahead would be harder, stranger, and more dangerous. But he also knew something else. He had begun to prove that humans could stand their ground, think clearly, and maybe, just maybe, change the galaxy itself. Days passed aboard the obsidian throne, and Eric began to adjust to the alien rhythms of the ship. He had learned to move with care, to observe the subtle cues of Silthara's mood, and to anticipate the actions of the Zalaris around him. He still felt small, fragile, and human, but he also felt a spark of confidence. The Queen's curiosity was not a threat, at least not yet. It was an opportunity, a dangerous, unpredictable opportunity, but one that he intended to use. One morning, while examining a section of the ship where the energy conduits converged, Eric noticed something unusual. A minor fluctuation in the energy flow caught his eye, a pattern that did not match the normal operations. To the untrained eye, it would have been invisible, but Eric's human instincts, honed by years of observation and problem-solving, told him that it could be significant. He paused, listening to the hum of the ship. Something was off. He walked closer, studying the conduits and the readouts on the alien interface. His heart pounded. A misalignment here, if unnoticed, could escalate quickly. Not a catastrophic failure like before, but enough to compromise a crucial section of the ship during an emergency. He debated whether to alert the engineers immediately. A false alarm could make him look incompetent or reckless, but hesitation could be deadly. He took a deep breath and approached one of the engineers nearby. "I think there's an irregularity here," he said carefully, pointing at the conduit. "If it isn't corrected, it could cause instability in this sector's energy field." The fluctuation disappeared. Silthara, who had been observing silently from a distance, moved closer. One of her limbs brushed lightly against the railing above Eric's head, a gesture that seemed almost like acknowledgement. "Your species has perception," she said. "Most beings would not notice such detail. You act with awareness beyond your size." He had survived another test, not through strength, but through observation and human ingenuity. Later that day, Silthara summoned him to the council chamber. The room was enormous, filled with Zalaris council members, creatures of different shapes, sizes, and forms, all observing Eric with intense scrutiny. The air vibrated with energy as the queen spoke. "This human," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber, "has shown insight, caution, and initiative. He may offer perspectives that our kind has overlooked. You will hear him now. I have observed patterns in your fleet's patrol routes and energy management," Eric began, careful to sound confident without arrogance. "If adjusted, some of these routes could optimize efficiency and reduce risk. There is also a potential hazard in this sector that, if ignored, could compromise your operations during an unexpected attack." Some council members leaned forward, intrigued. Others narrowed their eyes, suspicious of this fragile human daring to speak. Silthara raised a limb and the room fell silent. "Explain." He spoke clearly, logically, and precisely, outlining a method to strengthen the ship's defenses and reroute energy flows to minimize vulnerabilities. He watched carefully, noting the reactions of each council member. When he finished, there was a tense pause. Then slowly, Silthara nodded. "Remarkable," she said. "You have identified solutions where our systems would have responded too late. Humans are more capable than I anticipated." But he knew better than to let pride cloud his judgment. The Obsidian Throne was a living, breathing machine. Danger was never far. It was in the quiet moments, however, that Eric realized how human he truly was. While the Zalaris were calculating, precise, and efficient, humans had creativity, adaptability, and intuition. Those qualities were underestimated, dismissed, even ignored by many species across the galaxy. Yet they were the very qualities that allowed humans to survive in impossible situations. The next day, disaster arrived. A sudden alert sounded in the central corridor. Red lights pulsed across the walls, and alarms filled the air with a sharp, grating tone. Eric ran toward the control chamber, where engineers and officers were moving frantically. The queen appeared beside him instantly, her limbs moving with terrifying speed. "The Zarak," she said, her voice cold. "They have attacked. They breached the perimeter near Sector Theta 4. Our defenses must hold." Entire fleets had fallen to their onslaught in the past. The Obsidian Throne was massive, but even it could be overwhelmed if the attack was coordinated and relentless. Silthara's orders were clear. Stabilize the ship's shields, protect key energy nodes, and counter the attackers. Engineers scrambled to follow her instructions, but in the chaos, mistakes were made. Energy flows faltered. Shields flickered. Eric stepped forward. "If we reroute power through these secondary conduits, we can reinforce the shield where it is weakest," he said. "It will take coordination, but it can hold until countermeasures are deployed." He coordinated energy flows, identified vulnerable sectors, and even suggested maneuvers to redirect incoming attacks. Every second counted. Sweat poured down his face, but he remained focused. Panic would be fatal. The Zarak's ship struck repeatedly, lasers and energy blasts battering the throne's outer defenses, yet the human's strategy worked. Shields held, conduits stabilized, and critical systems remained operational. Engineers glanced at him in awe, some silently acknowledging that the fragile human had saved them from immediate disaster. Silthara observed the operation with a mixture of fascination and respect. "Clever," she muttered under her breath. "You act beyond instinct. You adapt. Humans may survive longer than I believed." Eric was allowed a brief moment to rest in a chamber designed for comfort, though sleep was difficult. His body ached, but his mind buzzed with the events of the day. Silthara entered quietly, moving closer to him. Her presence was imposing, but there was a softness in her gaze. "You have shown courage," she said. "You did not hesitate when the ship was threatened. You did not panic when others faltered. Humans are remarkable in their unpredictability. But your species has a spark. That spark can influence outcomes, even in the presence of beings far stronger and older than you. Ingenuity, courage, and quick thinking, qualities that the Zalaris rarely expected, had made a difference. The next days were quieter but tense. Eric continued to learn the inner workings of the throne, observe the Queen's strategies, and contribute where he could. Each action, each suggestion was measured carefully. One mistake could still be fatal, yet he felt a growing sense of purpose. Humanity had been underestimated across the galaxy, dismissed as weak, fragile, and insignificant. But aboard the Obsidian throne, Eric realized that even small, imperfect humans could make a difference. Even a single spark could change the course of events. As he prepared for rest one night, Eric reflected on everything he had experienced. Panic, fear, and uncertainty had brought him to this point. A single, impulsive comment on the first day had started a chain of events that led him to prove his worth. And now, with the Queen observing him, humans had a chance to show that courage, ingenuity, and heart were strengths no one could underestimate. Eric knew the challenges ahead would be greater. The Zerak would return, and other threats lurked in the galaxy. But he also knew that humans could survive, adapt, and even influence beings far stronger than themselves. And perhaps, just perhaps, the spark of humanity aboard the Obsidian throne could grow into something far greater, a force the galaxy had never seen before. For now, he closed his eyes, letting exhaustion take him, readying himself for the days to come. Each step, each decision, each act of courage would matter. And Eric was determined that humanity's spark would not be extinguished, not while he still drew breath. The warning sirens blared across the Obsidian throne, shaking the corridors with an urgency Eric had never experienced before. He had survived observation, minor emergencies, and even a surprise attack from the Zerak, but this was different. The Queen's voice cut through the alarms like thunder. "They breached the outer perimeter in larger numbers than expected," Sulthara said, her limbs moving in rapid, precise motions. Her golden eyes glimmered with both fury and calculation. "All crews prepare for defense." "Lieutenant Eric, your guidance is required." He followed the Queen to the command chamber, where the central control panels glowed with streams of information, star systems flashing red, and energy nodes flickering. "The Zerak are larger than intelligence predicted," Sulthara said. "Our shields can hold for a short period, but we need to act decisively. What do you suggest, human?" He studied the display carefully, noting the positions of the attacking ships, their energy signatures, and the weak points in their formation. He knew this would require bold action, coordination, and a willingness to take risks. "Sir Queen," he said, trying to steady his voice, "if we divert power from secondary sectors to the main shield nodes and simultaneously use focused energy pulses on their flanks, we can disrupt their attack pattern. We'll need to reroute quickly and coordinate the defensive teams. If your calculations are wrong, the ship may lose integrity." He directed engineers, humans, and Zalaris alike, guiding energy reroutes and shield stabilization. The ship's hum intensified as power surged through conduits, and energy shields flickered under strain. Every instruction he gave had to be precise, every movement calculated. The Zerak launched wave after wave of attacks. Energy beams struck the hull, shaking the massive ship. Crew members shouted, limbs moving at incredible speed to maintain systems. Eric felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but he focused on logic and observation. Fear was a tool he could not afford. Panic would be fatal. "Divert power to the secondary nodes," he shouted, pointing to a panel of glowing conduits. "Now, synchronize the flank pulses." Timing is critical. Despite being physically weaker and smaller, humans had an advantage the aliens often overlooked: ingenuity. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as the battle continued. The Zerak's fleet adapted, probing the defenses, attempting to exploit weaknesses. Each time, Eric anticipated their moves, offering new strategies that leveraged the ship's energy patterns, the terrain of nearby asteroids, and the weaknesses in the enemy formation. At one critical moment, a section of the shield faltered near the aft engines. A direct hit could cripple the ship's mobility, leaving it vulnerable. Eric's mind raced. He spotted a potential solution, risky but effective. "Redirect energy from the upper conduits to aft reinforcement channels," he shouted. "It's unstable, but it will hold long enough to repel their next strike. It's the only option that guarantees temporary stability and protects the critical systems." The moment was tense, every second stretching into eternity. Then, as the Zerak unleashed their next volley, the shields held. Energy pulses rebounded, striking the attacking ships, disrupting their formations. A ripple of relief spread through the chamber. Engineers glanced at Arik with astonishment, muttering in their alien tongue. The humans working alongside him nodded subtly. Even the Queen's own advisors seemed momentarily stunned. "You have exceeded expectations," Sulthara said quietly, almost to herself. Then louder she addressed the council. "This human has demonstrated the value of adaptability, perception, and courage. He acts with clarity where others falter." He had survived scrutiny, observation, and minor emergencies. Now, in the midst of a full-scale assault by one of the galaxy's most feared species, he had proven that humans, small, fragile, and underestimated, could make a difference. The battle raged on for hours, but gradually the Zerak began to retreat. Their attacks faltered under the coordinated defenses, and the Obsidian Throne's countermeasures, guided in part by Arik's strategies, had taken a toll on their formation. Finally, the last wave of enemy ships pulled back, disappearing into the void. The chamber erupted in quiet celebration. Crew members moved with relief, checking systems, stabilizing power flows, and tending to minor damages. Arik leaned against a panel, exhaustion washing over him. His hands shook, but his mind was alive with the exhilaration of survival and achievement. Sulthara approached him, her many limbs moving in their fluid, impossible grace. "You acted decisively," she said. "You observed, analyzed, and guided. You took risks humans rarely attempt, and yet you succeeded. You have earned trust. You may yet survive longer than expected." Arik assisted in analyzing the damage, offering suggestions for reinforcement, and helping the Zalaris crew optimize energy flows. Every action reinforced the growing respect between him and the Queen. His human spark, small and fragile though it seemed, had proven itself in the face of immense danger. He began to understand something fundamental about the Zalaris. They valued results, precision, and strength, but they respected cleverness and courage. A small species like humanity, underestimated across the galaxy, could influence outcomes with ingenuity and daring. Sulthara observed him constantly, sometimes silently, sometimes with deliberate questions. She tested his judgment in simulations, hypothetical scenarios, and small tasks. Arik rose to each challenge, showing patience, creativity, and courage, reinforcing her growing recognition of humanity's potential. One evening, she brought him to a balcony overlooking the stars. The Obsidian Throne hummed beneath their feet, alive and powerful. "Humans are small," she said, her voice softer now. "Fragile in form, but your species carries a spark I did not expect. You may yet prove that even the smallest beings can influence great outcomes." The galaxy was dangerous, filled with threats far beyond what Earth had ever faced. But Arik understood now that humans had a place, a role, and a purpose. Even in the shadow of beings far stronger and older than themselves, they could survive, adapt, and even change the course of events. As he prepared for rest, exhaustion finally catching up to him, Arik allowed himself a moment of reflection. Panic, fear, and uncertainty had brought him here, to this massive alien ship, and into the presence of one of the most feared queens in existence. Impulsiveness and courage, qualities sometimes overlooked or dismissed, had guided his actions. And ingenuity, the uniquely human spark, had saved lives. Arik knew that even greater challenges awaited. The Zerak would return, and the galaxy contained other unseen threats. But he also knew something profound. Humans were underestimated, yes, but underestimated beings often held the greatest potential. Small, fragile, and imperfect, yet capable of brilliance. And aboard the Obsidian Throne, amid alien intelligence, incomprehensible technology, and deadly threats, that spark, humanity, would shine. Arik closed his eyes that night, heart still racing, mind filled with plans and possibilities. The galaxy was vast, uncertain, and dangerous. But he would endure, he would act. He would prove that humanity's spark, though small and fragile, could endure and even thrive among the stars. The calm after the storm was fragile. The Zerak had retreated, but their threat remained. Every member of the Obsidian Throne moved cautiously, aware that even a minor misstep could bring devastation. Arik stood on the observation deck, staring at the stars, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, yet humans had survived, adapted, and even influenced the most terrifying beings in existence. Sulthara appeared beside him, her presence immense, elegant, and overwhelming. Her golden eyes reflected the distant light of the stars, and her limbs moved in their graceful, fluid pattern. "You have proven yourself," she said, her voice low but powerful. "Your species shows courage, intellect, and resilience, traits I have rarely witnessed together in a single being. You may speak before the council, represent your people." He had learned that fear could be a guide, not a chain, if used correctly. He followed Silthara into the council chamber where the alien delegates waited. Their forms varied greatly, some towering and armored, others sleek and tentacled, some small but glowing with energy. All eyes turned to him, assessing, curious, skeptical. Eric took a deep breath. "Honored council members," he began, his voice steady despite the tension. "I stand here not as a warrior nor as a conqueror, but as a representative of humanity. Our species has survived, endured, and thrived in ways that may seem fragile or insignificant to the galaxy. Yet we have strength that cannot be measured in size or power alone. Our strength lies in our courage, our creativity, and our will to act when it matters most. We have faced danger and uncertainty, yet we acted decisively. Humans can think under pressure, adapt to unexpected circumstances, and work together in ways that create solutions beyond simple calculations. These qualities, though small and imperfect, can be powerful when applied wisely. When the attack occurred, humans aboard this ship coordinated with your engineers, identified vulnerabilities, and implemented solutions in real time. We survived where caution alone might have failed. That is what we offer to the galaxy: ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. We may be small, but we are capable of shaping outcomes. Delegates exchanged glances, some blinking in unison, others murmuring softly. Eric's human heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. He knew that respect in this room was earned not by strength alone, but by action, courage, and clarity of thought. Silthara finally spoke, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Human, you speak truth. You have demonstrated the spark I mentioned before. Courage, adaptability, perception, and quick thinking are all qualities that allow even the smallest species to influence great events. You have earned a place at this council, not through intimidation or power, but through intellect and action." Others nodded, a subtle sign of respect. Eric realized that humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer hypothetical, it was being recognized before him. "Your species has much to offer," Silthara continued. "Not all will agree immediately, but influence is measured in deeds, not words. Humans have shown that they can act decisively, think creatively, and protect not only themselves but others in crisis. That is rare. That is valuable." Yet that spark of honesty, combined with courage and ingenuity, had led to recognition, trust, and now respect. The council debated for hours, discussing the inclusion of humanity in intergalactic affairs, their potential role in mediating conflicts, and their capacity for cooperation. Eric observed quietly, offering input when needed, always careful with his words, always measured. His contributions were subtle but effective, highlighting human traits that the Zalaris valued: adaptability, ingenuity, and moral reasoning. By the end of the session, a decision had been reached. Humans would be formally acknowledged as a species capable of contributing to intergalactic affairs, not as warriors, not as conquerors, but as partners and thinkers. A recognition of value earned through courage, intellect, and adaptability, not brute force. Silthara stepped forward, her limbs moving with deliberate grace. She extended one toward Eric, a gesture of honor among the Zalaris. "Lieutenant Eric Voss," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber, "you have represented your species with bravery, intelligence, and heart. You have proven that even the smallest spark can influence the galaxy. Humanity is welcome among us, not as inferiors, but as equals in capacity, thought, and action. May your people continue to grow, and may your spark shine brightly." He bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said simply. "I will continue to represent humanity with honor and diligence." It was a triumph not of size or strength, but of courage, intelligence, and human spirit. Later, Silthara led him to a quiet chamber. The hum of the ship was soothing after the intensity of the council. "Human," she said, her tone softer now, "you have done more than survive. You have influenced the outcomes of events, guided decisions, and demonstrated qualities that my species has rarely seen in combination. That is remarkable. That is admirable. Humans, we survive by acting together and using our wits." He had come aboard this terrifying ship as a single human, panicked and unsure. He had survived observation, crises, and full-scale attacks. He had earned the Queen's respect and the recognition of one of the most feared species in existence. Over the next few days, the Zarak were monitored, their movements observed, but no further attacks came. Eric assisted in planning defenses, coordinating humans and Zalaris engineers, and preparing for potential threats. Every day reinforced the lessons he had learned. Courage, ingenuity, and heart were more powerful than mere strength. Even a small, fragile species could survive and influence the galaxy when these qualities were applied. One evening, Eric stood again on the observation deck looking at the stars. The obsidian throne pulsed beneath him, alive and powerful. Sulthara appeared beside him. "Your species has begun a journey among the stars," she said. "You have earned recognition. You have demonstrated courage and creativity, but remember, this is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast. Challenges will come. Yet I believe humans can rise to them." Panic had led to honesty. Honesty had sparked curiosity. Curiosity had led to opportunity. Opportunity had led to recognition. Humans, small and underestimated, had survived and proven themselves. He had survived not by brute force, but by courage, intelligence, and heart. As he looked at the stars, he felt hope. Humanity had a place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as thinkers, as partners, as a species capable of remarkable things. The Queen's respect, the Council's recognition, and the lives he had helped save were proof of what humans could achieve when they acted together, adapted to circumstances, and never underestimated their own spark. Eric allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He remembered the first day, the panic, the blurted words, "You look beautiful." That impulsive comment born of fear had begun the chain of events that brought him here. Humanity's spark, fragile and small, had survived immense danger and earned respect among the stars. The galaxy was still vast, still unpredictable, still full of threats and wonders beyond imagining. But Eric knew this: humans could survive, humans could adapt, and humans could shine. Even the smallest spark in the right hands could illuminate the darkest reaches of space. He turned to Sulthara, who regarded him with the golden glow of her eyes. "We will do our best," he said, quietly but firmly. "Humans will not disappoint you. And that belief may change the course of the galaxy." And as he gazed out at the stars, Eric knew that humanity's spark would continue to shine, lighting the path forward into the vast, endless expanse of the galaxy.